Good morning to everybody. Welcome. Lorraine, I think, situated this conversation very well. The Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops for a number of years has been issuing guidelines around this issue. And the purpose of issuing the guidelines is to offer direction to bishops in their individual dioceses to help them create the protocols for prevention, for responding to allegations of abuse, for healing, and so on. So this latest iteration just came out from the most recent plenary assembly of bishops and is now to be considered by each bishop in his own respective diocese to review, possibly update the protocols that do exist. And as Lorraine mentioned, they have been in existence here for quite some time. But before I go into any detail about the document, the first thing that I would like to highlight is my message, which is indeed the message of the whole Archdiocese, to the victims of sexual abuse by clergy, and some of whom we know are here in the Archdiocese of Edmonton. And the message is simple. What you've experienced should never have happened, and we're very, very sorry. We know that such abuse leaves a long and a lasting scar, not only on you, the individual victim, but also on your family. As we continue to move forward on this issue, it is your interest that must and will come first in everything that we do. The Archdiocese and I personally are committed to this. The updated guidelines give a lot of attention to lessons that the Church has learned over the last number of decades. Among them is the need to listen to victims with careful attentiveness and deep respect. At the plenary meeting of the Canadian bishops in September, the bishops all had an opportunity to do just that. We were addressed by a victim of clergy sexual abuse. Hers was a courageous and a very moving testimony. It strengthened my resolve, and I believe it fair to say the resolve of every bishop, to do everything possible to prevent abuse, to respond decisively to allegations, and to work with victims and their families toward healing. This updated document has been in preparation for the past 5 years, and its publication had long been planned for this September. But as it happens, its publication occurs at the very time when the eyes of the world have been focused on cases of horrifying sexual abuse of minors by clergy, sometimes terribly mismanaged by bishops. I'm thinking in particular of the recent grand jury report out of Pennsylvania. The Church is established by Christ himself as the agent of hope for the world. Yet for anyone who has been abused by clergy, it's been experienced as a place not of hope, but of betrayal. It's ultimately a betrayal of Christ himself, who calls on the ordained to act in his name and to be instruments of his love and of his compassion. As a bishop, I share in the pain and in the shame of that betrayal. And I'm personally committed to do everything that I can to prevent such betrayals in the future. The new guidelines outline a very strict system of responding to complaints, focusing on the needs of the victims. If we are told of abuse involving a minor, the police will be told without delay. There would be a preliminary investigation at the diocesan level by a layperson with expertise in this area, and you'll hear from her, from Teresa, shortly. And there would also be a review committee involving laypersons and professionals, thus assuring that no one would have any chance of covering up. Now, all these points coming from the guidelines document are already in place in the abuse prevention protocols that we have had in effect in the Archdiocese of Edmonton for some time, most recently updated in 2010. But we cannot ever be complacent and must always seek ways to do better. So, we'll be reviewing our practices and our protocols in light of the 69 recommendations in this document to make sure that they're the best that they can possibly be. I'd like to highlight two principal themes of the updated guidelines document. And the first is accountability. And accountability includes the bishop. This means that as a bishop, I'm accountable to other bishops, to the people that I serve, and to the public. If we receive a credible and substantiated allegation of abuse, I'll act on it, and I'll act on it immediately. The accused will be suspended from ministry while the investigation continues. Parishioners will be informed, and we'll post the information on our website and other platforms. And we're also accountable to others for our efforts in abuse reporting and prevention. That's why we contracted in 2011 with Presidium, an international leader in abuse risk management. With their help, we adopted updated formal abuse policies, and we undertook to train every priest, deacon, seminarian, staff, and volunteer in the Archdiocese. Over 10,000 people received training. Presidium conducted a thorough audit of these efforts before granting its accreditation to the Archdiocese in 2017. Having an independent third party regularly audit our practices adds another layer of accountability, and Teresa will talk more about that. Transparency is another theme of the new guidelines document. It recalls how there was a culture of secrecy around sexual abuse in the past and summons us to transform that culture. There were many reasons for this secrecy, among them a misplaced desire to protect the reputations of individuals and the church as a whole, a desire among clergy to protect their brothers, and a fear of alerting other victims and raising more allegations. In many cases, on legal advice, victims who were offered compensation or access to counseling were required to sign confidentiality agreements. In other cases, they were verbally warned not to speak of their experience. And the result was that many suffered in silence. That's all wrong, and it can no longer be the way abuse is dealt with. I'm committed to ensuring that no victim is treated this way in this Archdiocese. We recognize that in order to heal, victims need to be able to speak freely about what they've experienced. If they've been abused at the hands of a priest or anyone else representing the Archdiocese, we do invite them to come forward. We recognize that disclosing sexual abuse is very difficult and it's painful. We shall always respect the privacy of victims and receive them with sensitivity. But I will not demand secrecy on their part. And I will also not hold any past victims to confidentiality agreements that they may have signed in the past. Now, as you can imagine, I've received many letters, emails, and messages on social media following the report of the grand jury in Pennsylvania and the revelations that a cardinal in the U.S. was himself an abuser, but nevertheless rose to the highest ranks of leadership in the church. One question that has been posed is this: why doesn't the Archdiocese publish the details of sexual abuse that has occurred here? We know, sadly, that the Archdiocese of Edmonton has not been immune from this plague. It's already public knowledge that some priests who have served in this Archdiocese have been charged and convicted of this crime. We believe it will be helpful to our people to have this information made public again, in a way that is readily accessible. And so, as part of our review process, we will compile the data and make it public on our website. I'm committed to that, but we'll need some time to ensure the completeness and the accuracy of everything that we publish, so I ask for your patience on that. And now, before I take your questions, I'd like you to hear from Teresa Kellendonk. Teresa oversees our abuse prevention program, and she's also the one who initially deals with complaints of abuse in the Archdiocese. And I can assure you, she takes that task very, very seriously indeed. So, Teresa.
First of all, when we talk about abuse, and we talk with the victims, and I certainly do a lot of that, the victim comes first. Their story comes first. We never aggress reaching out to a victim. They reach out to us. And then we hear them and we listen to them. Working with Presidium holds all of us accountable in the Archdiocese. But I think more broadly the church. We all have a responsibility. So that accountability that Presidium holds us to when we received our accreditation really is in a way a bit minimal. when it comes to preventing abuse and working with victims. The Archbishop said I take my role very seriously when it comes to abuse prevention, and I do. It rests on all of us to prevent abuse. So the protocols that we have in place, the abuse prevention training that we have been participating in for the last 7 years with all of our volunteers in our parishes, nobody gets a free ride. No bishop, no priest, no volunteer. Every employee must take our training. Why? Because we are committed. We are in it together, and nobody gets to say, well, it's not important to me. So if we want to do ministry in this archdiocese, then everybody is a part of that. It's not about compliance. This is about a commitment that we all hold together. And I'm certainly going to reiterate what the Archbishop said, that for the victims, when we're working with them, and when you've ever sat across from a victim and heard their story, you allow them to tell the story. We don't lead that story. They lead their story. So working with Presidium, we keep deepening what we know, our knowledge about abuse prevention, our knowledge about perpetrators, and also how do we investigate when an allegation comes forward. Next week, there's a team from Presidium coming to the Archdiocese to do just that. We're going to be doing investigator training. They'll be teaching some of our clergy about process, and then teaching some of us a deeper level of investigator training. So this commitment that we have in the Archdiocese to preventing abuse, working with victims, gaining as much knowledge as we can, that will always continue.
I'd like to share with you this morning a statement. And this was read at the weekend masses at our own Queen of Martyrs parish in Edmonton. That's the Vietnamese parish here in the Archdiocese. And the statement is as follows. The Archdiocese of Edmonton has been informed by the Archdiocese of Vancouver that they have recently received a report of allegations of sexual misconduct towards a minor and an adult by Father Peter Hung Cong Tran, a Dominican priest, when he was the associate pastor of St. Joseph Parish in Vancouver from 1998 to 2003. Father Tran served as pastor of Queen of Martyrs Parish in Edmonton from 2007 to 2016. And since then, he has been serving as pastor at St. Francis of Assisi Parish in Calgary. He is a priest of the Vietnamese Dominican Vicariate of St. Vincent Lim, which is a religious order. Bishop William McGrattan of Calgary has withdrawn Father Tran from St. Francis of Assisi Parish and has prohibited him from exercising any priestly ministry in the Diocese of Calgary. As you know, Archbishop Richard Smith has made safe environments and abuse protection a priority in the Archdiocese of Edmonton, and we are bringing this matter to the attention of the parish, and now today to the public, so that anyone who may be aware of other instances of misconduct can be encouraged to bring the information forward. If you are aware of any sexual misconduct or abuse involving clergy or anyone representing the Archdiocese of Edmonton, you're encouraged to notify police as well as the Archdiocese. You can find confidential reporting information on the Archdiocesan website, or you may contact the Archbishop's delegate for abuse complaints, Teresa Kellendonk. This information was shared on the weekend at all masses in every parish where Father Peter Tran had served, in the Diocese of Calgary and the Archdiocese of Vancouver and Edmonton. And the statement ends with a list of parishes where the priest has served. And we're providing you, the media, with copies of that statement today. This information will also be shared with our other parishes and posted as well on our website. So, we now welcome your questions.
How do you regain the trust of people after everything that they've seen in the media?
I think the first thing I'd want to do is acknowledge that that is a huge issue for us. I think it's fair to say the trust in the leadership of the church has been seriously compromised here, seriously weakened. I feel that. I'm sure every bishop feels that. What I'm finding from my own experience is the importance of being open and transparent and allowing people to speak. So, for example, when I visit a parish, I'll often meet with the parish pastoral council. I'll say, talk to me about this. How are you doing? Let's talk this through. Let's walk this through together. But we need to do more than just talk. I think people want to see concrete protocols, policies. They want to see evidence of commitment. Not just to prevention, but also to the way that we're going to respond sensitively, decisively, clearly to allegations, how we walk with people to help them and to heal. So my hope and my prayer is that over time, by doing just that, and I think it's going to take some time, frankly, that trust can be restored. And it also will require, I think, a frank admission on the part of all of us that trust right now has been seriously wounded.
How many cases of this are in Edmonton?
Well, as I say, we're going to be going through the records to compile all of that data. Now, I can tell you that what is already on the public record is there's about 6 priests that have been charged and convicted of this, and those instances go back decades. Right? So that is public knowledge. But I think, too, it's going to be important to make that public knowledge available again in a way that's readily accessible for our people, just as one more way of assuring them that we're on top of this, we're working through this. And that's something that we're going to need a little bit of time because of those time differentials, a little bit of time to compile and make available.
And when you talk about compiling the data, is that only going to be for instances that resulted in criminal convictions in criminal court, or what else can people expect to see on that compilation of data on the website?
Well, one of the things that we're going to have to be cognizant of as we compile that is the existence in this province of certain privacy laws that will protect certain confidential information. So we'll certainly look at what's on the public record, but I would want to take a look also where have we had some, what's the term, credible and substantiated, allegations perhaps didn't go to criminal court. Are these things that we could also make available to people? I guess in short, my goal would be whatever is going to be allowable in terms of applicable law, we want to make that available to people to be as absolutely transparent as we can.
What's your message to those people who it may have been decades and they're still afraid to come forward?
My message would be, I think, twofold. First of all, the fact that it does take long to come forward, we get that. We understand that now. If you look at the guidelines document, it outlines a number of lessons that the church has really learned over the past number of decades. And one of those lessons is that it does, for a whole host of different reasons, particular to the individual, it can take a while for them to step forward. We can probably imagine that would be a painful and a difficult thing. We also recognize, though, too, that coming forward and speaking about it is a necessary part of the healing. So however long it's been for someone, I would want to encourage them to come forward because we want to help and we want to heal. We want to listen. We want to walk with. As long as things remain enclosed within, in the dark, they're just going to fester. But what does help heal is light and openness. So I would assure people, come forward. You'll be received with great sensitivity and respect and patience and with deeply attentive listening ears.
Do you think the way that victims have been treated in the U.S. just recently, and when we look at the Kavanaugh case with the Supreme Justice, do you think that stops people from coming forward? Might
very well. I haven't followed that particular case too closely beyond what's in the headlines. I think it's fair to say, though, generally, that society has had to grow and to learn a lot about this scourge and how we help people, that they do need, I think, first of all, to receive an attitude of, I put it this way, an attitude of credibility. We're ready to listen. We're ready to believe. We want to give you the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, this is so serious. So you're not going to be turned away. You're not going to be put off. We want to listen.
You started with an apology today. What does that say to those people?
Well, how it will be received, I don't know, but I would just hope that it would be received as a very heartfelt, sincere expression of profound sorrow. This has no place anywhere, but it has no place in the church, above all. And I can tell you that as I speak to people, and we've done a lot of talking internally about this in our parishes and with diocesan staff and clergy, Catholics today, as they become aware of these things and are reminded of these things, are deeply embarrassed. They're deeply shocked. They're deeply full of shame. And we want opportunities to say to others that we are ashamed by this. We are deeply sorry. We want to walk with you, and we want to heal. And my prayer is that that is the way that the message would be received.
Can the church's image ever be fully repaired?
Yes. The reason I would say that with some confidence is not because of our capacities. The church we continue obviously to hold is the Church of Jesus Christ. It's the body of Jesus Christ. He remains present in his church. And he is the one ultimately who leads us through these crises that our sinfulness brings upon ourselves. He's the one that leads us to healing. This is not the first time the church has had to face a crisis of some sort. It's probably fair to say this is one of the worst that we've had to face. I mean, priests abusing children, it doesn't get any worse than that. So I do think that the recovery of credibility and trust will take time. I think we need to acknowledge that. But what gives us the confidence is that it's the Lord himself who remains in charge of the church.
Your Grace, could you or Father Hero talk about some of the education measures for seminarians to prevent this from happening?
Sure. Father Hero, did you want to come forward and talk about that a little bit?
Just before that, can I ask?
Sure.
Why should an Edmonton parent trust their children with the Archdiocese of Edmonton?
That's a question that's not infrequent. And so, for example, one of the areas in which we will encounter that in our parishes is, say, for example, children are being prepared to celebrate confession for the first time. Sometimes parents, and I get it, I understand this, having listened to everything that's in the news, will feel very, very reticent to have their child alone with a priest, hearing the confession. So I think the first thing we need to do in situations like that with parents is, first of all, acknowledge that this is a problem. Acknowledge that their lack of trust, their fear, their suspicion is entirely understandable, normal, natural. And we will work with them on that. To continue with that example, what we will often do in those cases is say to the parents, look, we're not going to have the child alone with the priest in the confessional. You're worried about that. So perhaps in ways that will always preserve the child's privacy and confidentiality, we can have the priest in the sanctuary of the church, for example, visible to all, a couple of chairs at a distance that nobody hears what's being said, but to maintain that visibility and that transparency. So yeah, if there's a lack of trust or worry, I get it. But acknowledging that with the parents and working with the parents, I think can go, please God, can go a long way to help to heal that.
My name's Father Stephen Hero. I'm the rector of St. Joseph's Seminary, and this is my 7th year now as rector of the seminary, and I've been on the formation team for 13 years. So I've had some experience here, and so I'd like to respond to your questions about seminary formation. Certainly, I would say we're very blessed to be situated here in the Archdiocese of Edmonton, and as you've heard from His Grace Archbishop Smith, that I think we've been doing, trying to do a better job, and we've had good protocols in place for a number of years in the Archdiocese, and the seminary has been also under that leadership as well, and so we've been trying to do a good job in terms of screening the men that come into formation, and also a better job at forming men for priesthood today, and particularly by giving attention to the human dimension of formation, the personal dimension of formation on their character, their boundaries, their self-knowledge, that sort of thing. But if I could maybe first of all speak about the screening process. All of our seminarians are studying for a diocese, normally in Western Canada, and so there's already a screening process in their own diocese. So each seminarian who's here at St. Joseph Seminary has been accepted by a bishop and is studying for a diocese. And so I can tell you a little bit, they certainly spend time getting to know the candidates as they are thinking and discerning about a vocation to priesthood. This is happening in the diocese. Then when the time comes for a seminarian to start, a man to think about applying for a seminary, the diocese would start to gather a number of documents that would verify certainly his identity, his faith history, education, work history. It's a police information check with vulnerable populations checked off to help us understand this candidate. There's a psychological evaluation, and so on and so forth. The diocese takes that into discernment, and very often, as in our diocese here, there's a screening committee that would again interview that man more formally, look at all that documentation and make a recommendation to the bishop of the diocese. And sometimes men are turned away at that point, or deferred for a time. If the bishop accepts the candidate at that point, then he sends all that documentation over to us here at St. Joseph Seminary, and we then have our own process where we review all of those documents again, check up on letters of reference, that sort of thing. And if we have any concerns, there are times when we may have said no, or want to delay a candidate that's been sent. But dioceses do very good jobs about screening, so we don't have that issue very often. Okay, so the first thing is, I think, trying to do a more stringent screening, and we've been doing that for, I think, 25, 30 years now. In terms of, it's been a great development in seminary formation in the last 30 years or so, certainly since the Apostolic Exhortation, I Will Give You Shepherds, by John Paul II in 1992. And in that document, they talk about 4 different dimensions of priestly formation, and the very first one that they mention is human formation, making them good, helping them to be good, healthy human beings. And then the other 3 are ones that we might be more familiar with, like the spiritual formation, academic formation, and pastoral skills, pastoral formation. The very first one in the document is human formation, and that's something that in the last 30 years, I know here at St. Joseph Seminary and at seminaries around the world, they've been trying to develop a better way of preparing men in terms of their character. And so what we do here at the seminary, for example, there's information available from that psychological evaluation that helps the candidate to know himself better. What are some things for him to work on over his years of formation? And every seminarian in their first year does a seminar on family of origins, and then in the second year there's another seminar on family of origins where they're reflecting on their family and what they received from their family and their personal history, what might still be impacting them negatively, positively in their life. We have, over the years, the whole program of human formation where all throughout the year, each year of formation, the gentlemen are working on various topics of human and personal formation, including kind of leadership styles, collaboration with others, boundaries, working on affective or emotional maturity, things like that. All of that is integrated through spiritual direction. I have to say we live in community. We live in community, so there is, as a community of brothers, men, we have priests who are resident here at the seminary with the seminarians, so we get to know the candidates very well. And a lot of things just, personalities come to the surface. We know, and the community helps us to correct and challenge others. There's a clear process of evaluation, self-evaluation and evaluation every year that the seminarians go through. So they reflect on how they're doing, and so do we. And there's feedback given to the seminarian at Christmas time, and then at the end of the year, and that a report is prepared for their bishop. So there's clear feedback about issues, things they're working on, or that we think they should work on. And then there are always the team for the priests here. We discern that sometimes people need to work on issues outside of the seminary. And so the seminaries are asked to leave. At other times, the seminarian decides that for himself, through his own. This is a process of discernment.
I just want to let Teresa come back for a minute, just to address that question about why do victims take so long to come forward?
It's an excellent question. Shame was invited into, that person didn't invite the shame into their lives, but it was certainly brought into their lives. And sometimes for victims, it takes them 20, 30, 40 years to even share that story with family members, spouses, siblings, or a counselor. And so when I said before that we never aggress for a victim to come forward, we may get third-party information about something that might have happened, but it is not my role to go into someone's life, call them up and say, hey, I just got a phone call and we've heard this story. Is this about you? I would never, ever do that, and nobody that works with victims would ever do that. So we work with victims with kid gloves. There is so much gentleness, and we walk with them. So as much as they're able to share a story, we are there to listen. Or, in my case, I am there to listen. But never, never do you push or aggress into a victim's life to get them to share more than what they are capable of doing. Sometimes we can victim shame. The public, we want victims to say something because we want it out there that somebody did something, and that is completely against what we would do when we're working with victims. You don't cause deeper trauma to the person or vicarious traumatization. So we walk really gently with a victim, and they share as much as they can share. And they will then, when they trust you, and you asked about, I'm paraphrasing the question here, but about trust. People will only trust us when we build a relationship, one relationship at a time, and we show that we can be trusted. But if we go against that, then we've broken trust with victims, and why would they want to come forward? So whether it's us or in any other organization, really walking gently with people is so much of the role of my office. Is you just walk really gently with people.
How often are you dealing with these allegations in your office?
I'm getting more stories. Sometimes they want to just share a story. They're not really telling you that a priest or a lay person did something. Or they're talking about family violence and their domestic violence in the home. But I would say on average, I would probably 3 times a month have somebody contact me and say, I just need to share something. Can I talk to you? And it doesn't necessarily mean that it was about a clergy. It just means that this event happened in their life, and is there somebody that can hear that? If it's a clergy, that's a whole other, okay, here we get the file created and conversation with His Grace, and that person is removed from ministry immediately. There's no, I don't hold back on that. Yeah, that file's done, and away we go.
How often are you dealing with clergy allegations?
For sexual abuse, I haven't had a clergy allegation. We did have an allegation of sexual abuse by a volunteer, and we worked with Zebra Child Protection Center. It did not go to court. There was no charge. The mother refused to allow the child to be interviewed, and that built our relationship working with Zebra Child Protection Center, working with EPS, our CMP. So again, when I talked about deepening what we do and that breadth of knowledge, it's building those relationships with those organizations as well. And the victim is always in control. So for this mom who didn't want anything to happen, as much as I might have personally wanted something to happen and a charge laid, it can't be me that directs that. So really understanding the process of law, really understanding working with police. We never ever get to interfere in a police investigation unless they give us permission to then reach out to the victim. If in this case we did with the family, once they conducted their investigation, we were allowed to reach out to the family, but you never interfere. And sometimes, we say, what did we miss in our screening? We talk to the police about that as well. What did we miss? They know what our protocols are, what a lot of our policies are. We've shared that with them and certainly with Zebra Child Protection Center. So the work that we do, it's a collaborative effort. It's not just the Archdiocese alone. It's working with those stakeholders, really important stakeholders, so that we're all working together to protect children and vulnerable persons.
Can you talk a little bit about the process when you would get a complaint against a clergy, what you would do?
An allegation will come in. We have a protocol on an allegation. So when a complaint comes in, I gather the information if it's a clergy or a lay person, and that is all documented. Then we inform the complainant, the person that is making the complaint. We let them know what the process is, that we will be removing that person from ministry. We have to do an investigation. That means we're going to be interviewing all of the persons involved. Oftentimes that means you may be interviewing far more than what was first indicated, just because names pop up in interviews from perhaps other victims. And if it's credible, then there's further actions that are taken. So if it's an allegation of sexual harassment, or I said I haven't had a sexual abuse allegation against a clergy, but we still remove that person from ministry, because if it's bullying, some type of aggressive behavior that goes against our HR policies or our abuse policies, then we want to make sure that everybody remains safe in their work environment, and until that process of investigation is completed. Those take time. It doesn't happen like TV, in a week we're all done. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3, 4 weeks, because you're waiting for interviews to take place, people to get back to you. They say they will, and then they're afraid. And so you always have to make time for that potential victim to be able to speak.
When do police get called?
Sexual abuse of children or sexual abuse of an adult, always.
Right away? Or is there previous phone calls that have to be made before police?
No, we would contact the police right away. I contact the police, or sometimes family members do. In the case of that volunteer, it was the family member that contacted the police. And then we get the phone call from the police that there's an investigation. So it can be either or. Sometimes victims are afraid to call the police. They don't want it to go public, so they don't want it to go to the police. We strongly encourage, and I can't force somebody to go to the police. We strongly encourage them to go to the police, but anything with a child always goes to the police. Whether they want to or not, I have to report that.
Even if it's historic, do you go to police?
They're an adult now. We can't make that determination. We strongly encourage that person to go to the police. And I've even offered to walk with them, to go to the police station with them, to report it, especially when they're afraid. Because they're an adult now, so because they're an adult, the police have shared with us that I can't make them go to the police.
I'm just wondering if the process that you just described, if that's been changed now that the new guidelines are out. Like, I'm just wondering if the national guidelines have really changed sort of what you're doing here in the diocese.
We're going to, as the Archbishop shared earlier, we are going to be looking at every guideline and all of our policies, and where do we need to deepen, improve, or not change. I'm pretty confident that we have some really good policies in place, but some of those processes I think could do with some tightening up. But again, it's looking at every guideline individually and then going through them and making sure that we are as good as we can get in terms of addressing what the guidelines are asking of us and what our policy statements currently state.
Thank you, Andrew. In the case of an allegation that may be alleged against a bishop, I mean, first of all, no bishop is above this. I mean, we are all accountable for our actions. If we're talking about the bishop himself being alleged to have abused or is abusing or something, first of all, we would encourage people to go to the police, above all. If the bishop is considered of having committed any kind of a crime, go to the police. Internally, so there's always the option of reporting things to our delegate here, and the bishop would be subject to that same process as everybody else. But in addition, bishops are accountable to the Holy Father, and that accountability takes place through the papal nuncio, the Pope's representative in a particular country. So the report should also be made to the nunciature, who would then refer it to the Holy See for action. That's how that would work.
Sorry, perhaps I just want to get this clear. So the confidentiality clause part,
Yep.
and you're waiving all of that, but that's just specifically for the Archdiocese of Edmonton. Is that correct?
That's the purview that I would have just for the Archdiocese. I couldn't do it elsewhere.
Okay, so but that's not national. I mean, these are just these are guidelines, right?
That's right. But I think you'd find that the bishops, certainly from the conversation that we had about the guidelines, they're taking all of this seriously. These are lessons that we've all learned. What we want first and foremost is the healing of the individual. If release from any dimension of a confidentiality agreement is going to further that healing, the release will take place. And certainly that's going to happen here in the Archdiocese, without a question. And I have confidence that would happen elsewhere also.